Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Dina Zameta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and as partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening.
Good evening, listeners. Tonight's episode, Mediation to Resolve Neighbor Conflicts Over Our Pets, concludes series on disputes with neighbors between landlord and tenants and homeowner associations. When conflict exists, family companion and landlord-tenant or neighbor issues, to only name a few, emotions are piqued and litigation is often form of resolution. This choice may prove not to be the best venue in which to discuss a disagreement over an animal. Using mediation to resolve issues involving animals, confidential and more user-friendly means of reaching an agreement over a pet, which helps everyone win. Debra Hamilton, principal at Hamilton Law and Mediation, practices an alternative means of resolving disagreements between people over animals. She works with pet owners, providers, neighbors, and agencies. Them address misunderstandings, mistreatment, oversights involving pets, enabling them to find a more peaceful and relationship-saving solution, which is in the best interest of all. Debra is the author in the Bud, Not in the Butt, How to Use Mediation to Resolve Conflicts Over Animals. I am your guest host, and tonight we invite you to participate in our Twitter feed using hashtag Program Debra.
Hi, Tracy. How are you this evening?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'd be here to help your listeners figure out how to resolve conflict between them and their neighbors, whether they're the pet owner or they're the neighbors. It's all about having that conversation, so I'm so glad to be here.
We are excited to have you on the program tonight. Who is Debra Hamilton?
Well, I am the principal at Hamilton Law and Mediation. I'm a former assistant district attorney from Westchester County, New York, and a former assistant attorney general for the New York State Transportation Authority. Then I took kids, and when I went back to litigating cases, I realized I'd learned a lot as a PTA president. So I throw my lot in, hang up my litigation pump, resolve conflicts involving animals using mediation. Aren't really able to resolve these conflicts in a way where everyone comes out a winner. To lose in court, where mediation, everybody wins, and the animals and the mumbo-jumbo. So that's who I am. I help people have these difficult conversations involving an animal, whether you're in divorce or landlord-tenant or neighbors, anything that has to do with an animal. I help you have that conversation, resolve the conflict, and hopefully retain the relationship, because that's what we all want to do, live in a good relationship, being able to wave to our neighbors as we drive out our driveway.
That's really powerful how you were able to switch the gears like that, and from litigation to helping people decide what's best for their animals using mediation. That's really powerful to say how important and how strong mediation is for resolving conflicts.
Well, it really is, because it talks about the most important thing, which is the emotion surrounds that involve animals. As you know, Tracy, because you're an attorney, the law cannot bring emotion into the discussion about the law. Where in mediation, that is what surrounds, so that we really address what and how we can resolve it.
Can you tell our listeners exactly what is litigation?
So litigation is where you hire an attorney, usually very expensive, to negotiate a settlement. But if you can't negotiate the settlement, you have an understanding that you'll go to litigation, which means you file papers with a court. It doesn't work. You go to court and you actually have a trial. Sometimes it's a short trial, a bench trial in front of a judge, because it usually doesn't involve a jury, but I guess it could in some, if there's animal abuse or something else going on. Sign out a litigation with an attorney, present you and be your voice. You're giving your voice away to somebody else. You're giving the ability to have a conversation away to somebody else. And a lot of people, Tracy, like to do that because they don't like to address it. They like to give it over to somebody else to resolve for them. In mediation, the mediator holds a stick that enables people to have that conversation. So the difference really between litigation and mediation is resolving the disagreement on your own terms, in your own way, and using your own language in mediation. And in litigation, hiring someone to go to bat for you, to maybe use language you would use, maybe use language you wouldn't use. Either win or lose, there's no win-win for the animal.
Wow. So litigation, if someone's thinking about trying it and through mediation, they may incur legal fees. There's going to be headache involved, and they may possibly not come to a resolution even though they've had their day in court and they've been to trial and they've hired an attorney and they've been working with them and meeting with them. But in terms of mediation, experience for them.
Absolutely. It'll be more of a heart-based, and in litigation, they absolutely will come to a determination. It just might not be the determination they were hoping for and might be sort of and spending a lot of money to get there, because it really is not inexpensive to bring, even sending letters to your neighbor about the barking dog is not inexpensive to have a lawyer write those letters. And are you threatening, you ramp up the hostility. So even if you win, I always say this to people, even if you win, you lose, because now you can't even talk to your neighbor. That really diminishes your enjoyment of your own property and their enjoyment of their property.
So litigation might be a win-lose situation, because what you're losing out on is that relationship piece, that relationship component where maybe you said hi to your neighbor every time they were pulling out of the driveway, but now you've gone to court and you've had this agreement, one of the sides feels hurt, so you see your neighbor and you just the other way. You don't even acknowledge their presence as they're leaving.
Right, and that really is not the way we want to live our lives. I mean, in the scheme of things, we want to be happy in our neighborhood. If you live in a building and someone brings a dog in for either emotional support or a service animal, I always say you should sit down and have a conversation. A number of my colleagues don't necessarily feel that way, and I said, listen, we're accommodating and who needs the dog, and we're happy to do it. See how they can also accommodate us. And if you have a conversation at mediation, tell me why you have the dog. That's protected. I bought in this. It has no pet because I'm afraid, I'm allergic, my kids are afraid, I was bitten by a dog. Whatever the reason is that I'm in a building that doesn't have pets and you arrive with a dog, troubling to me. So if in mediation you could sit down, hold this, allow them to have a conversation, that accommodation we're giving to the emotional support animal or the service animal, accommodation for the person who bought in a no-pet building, and see how we can accommodate each other. I mean, do decision and then say, I can have my dog, and really doesn't make even living in buildings animals that you really truly need. Some of these dogs are diabetes alert dogs. Some of these dogs are I don't really want to tell you, Tracy, that that's what my dog does.
Right.
But really, if you're that deathly afraid, I wouldn't mind taking the elevator at a different time or taking another elevator. If I see you in the elevator, skip the elevator. You know, these are the things that neighbors do, and there's no avenue in mediation where you can have these conversations.
For mediation, we've talked about the neighbor conflicts. We've talked about some landlord and tenant issues. Are there any other housing animal conflicts that may be appropriate to mediate?
Well, you know, there are the disagreements that a lot of housings have now. Mediating those kind of conflict arguments where you're not allowed to have this kind of dog here, or you have to have a dog under 20 pounds, sitting down with a mediator who holds safe out why it is we feel these dogs shouldn't be in the building, why it is that we feel these dogs should be in the building because I have the dog and I am in the building. Everyone the opportunity to, and their anxieties, desires, and their ability to the dog from other people and keep people safe from the dog. That these dogs are, you know, not what sure is. It's all about, Tracy, that for me, in my practice, it's all about people who have a preconceived idea or notion to have a conversation. We limited these ideas and notions that have to do with animals. If you have a dog in a no-pet building, if you have a dog that's barking all the time, if you have a dog frightens you when you're in the hallway, how do you have that conversation with your neighbor? I actually have videos up on my website because to their neighbor, they don't want to hire a mediator, which I highly recommend, but make sure you don't talk to your neighbor about their dog when you're angry. Seems intuitive, but usually we knock on the door when we're really pissed off because the dog has been barking, and that really doesn't work because you have to understand the person with the dog, protection and fear. Protection that something's going to happen to their dog. Bigger problem because under the law this might happen or under the law that might happen, so they shut down immediately as well. So here you are, you totally reasonable, going to the door, knocking on the door, asking them to or whatever, and they just absolutely jump down your throat and you're like, wait, wow, you don't know what to do. There's no one there to be heard, and they can be heard in a way, takes you to the next step, which is.
So some of the great benefits of using mediation opposed to litigation when you have these animal disputes is the opportunity to have the conversation, to find out exactly their reasoning for, you know, wanting to take the elevator opposed to taking the stairs. You know, are they afraid of someone? Are they afraid of the dog? Maybe someone was bit by a golden retriever as a child, and so when they see your dog, they run the other way. So it allowing you the opportunity to explore the concerns opposed to just shutting down and not having that conversation that lets you understand where each party is coming from.
Which, when you shut someone down, you really raise the animosity, be it breed of dog, be it a person with an emotional support dog, or the person living in a building without, or the neighbor with the barking dog, or the neighbor who lives next door to the barking dog. If you don't give them an opportunity to have so in mediation, we guide the conversation by enabling someone to tell me their story. So they're not attacking the guy across the way. They're actually telling me there's a number of times when you're in conflict with someone, you're not listening to what they're saying. You're thinking about what it is you're going to say, and sometimes you only hear about 10% of what they're saying. And I reflect back what they're saying to have them really hone in on what their complaint is. Offending party, so to speak.
Right.
But really, it's just that the dog can't bark at 6 a.m. because they're just getting home from work and going to sleep. And the neighbor might never even know and didn't know that letting the dog out in the morning when they have to get to work and, letting the dog out for as long as they can because the dog's going to be in the house. I had a case, my client side was an attorney, a friend of mine, who got her mother's dog. She really didn't want her mother's dog, so she left them out all day barking in the yard while she went to work. And the neighbor next door was home with her invalid husband, and they were at each other's throats. Said, well, I buy her a basket of fruit. And so we actually sat down and had a conversation. At the end of the conversation, the woman who lived next door said, I'll be happy to go into your house and let your dogs out because it'll give me a break from being stuck in the house with my husband. Only next door. And at the end of the day, not only did the stay in the house, the woman next door got to take a break and take a walk next door and pet the dogs. And human-animal bond studies have shown people who pet dogs, or she couldn't have a dog of her own because it would have been too much with her husband, but having the dogs next door sort of be her surrogate dog. Now she's the person who watches the dogs when these people go on vacation. That would never have occurred. Your dogs are barking. I'm buying you fruit. Your dogs are barking. I'm buying you fruit. Because they never got what it was that they needed to do. When the woman with the dogs felt guilty that she wasn't home with her mother's dog, so she had her mother's dog. The neighbor actually gave her peace of mind that her dogs were being cared for. Her mother's dogs were being cared for very well. And this other woman didn't have to listen to the bark all the time. Win-win.
That's just amazing how they can transform their relationship. And now everyone's winning in that scenario. Now has a, friend. She made a friend.
Yes.
She lets the dog out.
And I always say, what I do when I mediate is I keep the dogs, because usually it then gets personal. So I don't like you, you don't like me, I don't like you, you don't like me. And I really do like you. I wish your dog didn't bark. But once you ignore me, then I hate you. And so what I do is I bring the pet back, and then we're arguing over this pet, see how we can live with this pet in harmony. But very often, people will go out of their way because, A, they want to keep their pet. They don't want to really annoy anybody else, real estate, who make people fight to keep their emotional support dogs. I go, you really shouldn't do that, because if they legitimately can keep their emotional support dogs, wouldn't it be better to enable them to accommodate fellow, because they will be happy that they didn't have to spend thousands of dollars on an attorney to get what they were going to get anyway. Then they would be happy to accommodate, responsible and respectful of the fact that they're being accommodated. You know what I mean? So we're accommodating you that you need this emotional support dog because you have diabetes, you have epilepsy, whatever it is, you have depression, whatever it is. We don't need to know that. We just need to know it makes your life better. Now, can you perform a service dog that makes our life better? They never get to ask that question because it gets to be with lawyers. And in the end, when they do get to keep their dog, they say, well, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to be nice to you. I'm going to do what I can do because I know I can.
I want to remind our listeners that you are listening to the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk Radio program, and we are talking with Debra Hamilton. She mediates and teaches an alternative means of resolving disagreements between pet owners and their neighbors, homeowner associations, and landlord-tenant disputes. Tonight we are exploring animal mediation and strategies for having conversations about animal disputes. Say our listeners find themselves in an animal dispute, to have a conversation about their pet with their neighbor, landlord, or tenant, or even their homeowners association.
Absolutely. Their management, anyone that has where you live and the animals you live with. Programs that I teach, mnemonics that people can think of when they're in the throes of getting angry. You and I live next to each other. Your dog barks all the time. I want to choke you to death because I can't get any sleep. A lot of the people who come to my classes, that moment when they are so angry, they think of, from my old days as a beauty, it stands for also known as, But in my purpose, I use it to trigger you to an addressing of a problem, the desire to keep a relationship, and appreciate another person's point of view. So let's start with the first one. What you want to do is you want to address the problem. You don't want to let it fester. You don't want to let it knock on the door and you're really angry until you're calmer. If you're really, at your wit's end, wait till you're calmer. Don't let it go and go and go and just get angry every time you hear the dog bark. But, I'd like to talk about the dog when we get a cup of coffee. I have a video out that says, get a cup of coffee. Don't, talk about this in a way that's so, at the door, at each other's throat. Invite them over for coffee, whatever it is. You can address it in a neutral place, in a neutral way. Second one of the AKA is relationship. Recognize that your life is going to be so much better. The relationship going. At the very least, you don't want to be in silence. Don't you hate when you get on the elevator, so quiet, nobody can say good morning? It sort of ruins my day. How about you, Tracy?
Right.
I agree. It's almost that lack of personal connection.
Yeah, because you want to get on the elevator and you want to say hello to the people there because, well, even in a big city like you really want to, or if you're in your neighborhood, you want to wave to people. The relationship, that is paramount because not only will it make their life better, it'll make, and really I'm thinking selfishly, relationship heal is really important. Then lastly, appreciate somebody else's point of view. So the neighbor comes and tells you your dog is barking. It doesn't mean that you agree with them that your dog is barking a lot. If you say, if you're telling me, I really appreciate that, I didn't realize the dog was barking so much. Appreciate it doesn't mean you agree. The only thing appreciate and agree have in common are the letters are going to work this out, enable each other to address it and talk about it, talk it out if we ignore it. When you're in the throes, a lot of my veterinarian friends, when I do they go, I remember the AKA. I said, good. Appreciate how the other person feels. Period at the end of appreciate. Because when you say but, they know you're going, you don't need to. Say, I appreciate that my dog is barking and it really is, annoying to you. I appreciate that. And I'm so glad you told me. What I really like about this is it's simple and easy to remember, AKA address the problem, the relationship, and appreciating someone's point of view does not mean you agree. And I think the last part of that, Debra, is really important because even I've been in a conflict where I feel like if I acknowledge that and what they've said, it almost feels like I'm agreeing with what they've said. And so there's just a different way to go about it when you're in a conflict. Is you can appreciate someone's point of view, but it doesn't mean you agree, right? Because you know what? That is their point of view, and you're not going to dissuade them as they're not going to dissuade you of your point of view. Mm-hmm. But as the great mediator Bill Urey from Harvard, there's always the third side. So there's my way, there's Tracy's way, and then there's the third way for where we're standing and show each other how wrong we are. Appreciate where you are. Find that alternative. I didn't know you worked till midnight, and I didn't know letting my dog out in the morning was waking you up. So glad you told me. I appreciate that you want to sleep. Right. How can you get mad? I know. How can you get mad? And then when you do something like that, then the person is appreciating you back for understanding what they just shared with you about, and then they feel heard. So then there's that connection where it's going towards a positive way, towards instead of negative. If you included that, I understand, but then people will go defensive because you're going to tell them how wrong they are. They assume that, and that's when your listening go into the toilet. You don't listen to people. I really appreciate you telling me that. Period. And how can we? I always add, say, how can I help you? That helps not as much as how can we work together, because it is about the we. Because there's a part that they have to play, and there's a part that you have to play. Thank you so much for sharing that method with us. Someone who's listening has written the method down, and they're going out into the world, and they're going to use it for the next animal dispute, but they also think mediation may be the next for them. Where can they find additional information? Every courthouse has a community mediation that you can avail yourself of. They're not necessarily focused on animal conflict. Nationwide, internationally, that's what I do. You can reach me if you have a question. Love to speak. www.hamiltonlawandmediation.com, or you can call me at 914-273-1085. I'd love for your listeners to pick up a copy of my book and read it and let me know what they think. Bud, not in the butt. How to use mediation to resolve conflicts over animals. And they can leave me a note and write me on our contact sheet at www.hamiltonlawandmediation.com. Cool. What we like to do before we go is do an assignment of the week or a call to action for our listeners, Debra. What would be your call to action or assignment for them after they've listened to your program? Well, for me, I would love for them to apply AKA in their life. So when you see yourself getting embroiled in a conversation that you know is not doing well, think about AKA, whether it has to do with an animal or not. Am I addressing the conflict or am I escalating the conflict? Am I trying to keep this relationship alive, or am I trying to, can I use language, appreciate? So the next time you're in a disagreement with someone and you're having a heated debate, aka, to retain the relationship and just use the language that appreciates how they see how far it gets you. And write me and let me know how it works, because I know that if you put that into play, you are just going to absolutely ever occur in your life, whether it be with animals, I do it, or not.
And can you share with listeners one more time the way that they can reach you after they've used that AKA method and they want to let you know how it worked out for them?
I'd love to hear from people who use the method. Hamilton Law and Mediation, it's www.endmediation.com, and you can call me at 914-273-108. I am always ready, willing, and able to help anybody who has conflicts involving animals, because they are such a huge part of our life. To make sure that you live a happy life with them, going to litigation is the last resort. Try mediation first.
Thank you so much, Debra. And final message that you want to leave with the listeners tonight.
I really want listeners to take a minute and decide whether or not they want to win, to win or lose, because you never can tell which to win and which to lose in litigation. To mediation, always a win-win. Good news about mediation is if you don't lose your ability to be able to resolve a conflict using mediation where both of you feel as if you've walked away and have.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com, or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection, or Twitter me at TXConflictCoach.